Welcome back to Firestorm Games. In this video we'll be taking a look inside the starter pack for the new Tanks, the Modern Age Miniatures game. This game is set in a fictional Cold War gone hot scenario and features vehicles of NATO and the Warsaw Pact facing off against each other. Now you may remember that we've previously looked at the World War II version of this game, so to avoid any confusion when talking about both of these, I'll refer to this game as Modern Tanks and the previous as World War II Tanks. So let's open the box up and take a look inside. Let's kick things off with the rulebook. It's a full colour booklet which guides you through the playing of the game. The gameplay itself is already very simple and the diagrams and explanations really help complete beginners to get a firm grasp of the rules in no time at all. The rule set itself is very much the same as World War II tanks. Things like movement, combat and force construction are pretty much identical, which means that if you've played the older game, then you'll be able to hit the ground running. Also, I would recommend checking out our how to play video for World War II tanks, a link to which can be found in the description below. Whilst the core rules are the same, Modern Tanks does feature a few additional mechanics not found in its World War II counterpart. These help to represent some of the technological advancements made between the two time periods. The first of these new rules are for fielding helicopters. These operate in much the same way as regular vehicles, but you have the option to set your helicopters to stay low and benefit from cover, or to fly higher and have unhindered line of sight to their enemies. In addition to helicopters, we also have rules for soft-skinned vehicles such as Humvees and the missile systems that many of these lighter vehicles tote. Towards the back of the rulebook we have some basic instructions on building your own platoon before moving on to the scenarios. These give you a range of different objectives that range from simple meat grinders to taking and holding ground. Finally, the book ends with a handy reference page, perfect if you need a quick refresh on things like turn order or how combat works. In tanks, there are no rulebooks that contain the stats and abilities of your tanks. These are instead handled by cards. Each vehicle has its own card which details how fast it is, its damage output, its armor and how resilient it is. You can also find any special rules the vehicle has and what nation it belongs to here. The set comes with cards for each of the vehicles found in this starter kit, as well as one vehicle card for every other vehicle that is usable in Tanks, the Modern Age. This means that if you have any miniatures from Flames of War Team Yankee, then you can use these miniatures straight away. To supplement the basic tank cards, we also have various upgrade cards that can be purchased before a game. This can be specialised crew members, different types of ammo, and equipment that can improve the tank's capabilities, or reduce them for a cost reduction. I really like this method of displaying the rules, as when you have these two types of card combined, you have a really clear overview of what your tank's capabilities are at a brief glance, not having to flip back and forth through one or more rulebooks to find out what rules affect each tank is a massive time saver and really helps keep the flow of the game going. Each nation in Modern Tanks comes with its own special rules which reflect the battle doctrine of that nation during the late stages of the Cold War. Once again, these are also printed on some handy platoon cards. You will find one card for the Soviets and each major NATO force featured in Modern Tanks. The fourth and final type of card that we have is a critical card. These are drawn randomly should your opponent roll an undefended 6 to hit. These cards may incur additional damage and potentially cause your tank to receive a negative effect. These represent things like crews being stunned or mechanical failures. Hitting your opponent's tanks hard enough to cause their tracks to break is not only satisfying, but a likely effect of battle. Being able to have crews repair some faults also adds an extra level of tension to the end of the battle round, where you're hoping that your crew are no longer stunned or succeed in putting out an internal fire. Next up we have the cardboard tokens and dice. These are printed on a nice thick cardstock and give you all the gaming tokens you need to keep track of how fast your tank has travelled or how much damage has been inflicted on it. The set also comes with some flat printed terrain pieces. Whilst they're not anything to write home about visually, they do give you some straight out of the box methods of blocking line of sight without having to employ your library as a makeshift European village. Finally, we have the dice. These simple d6 are cast in red and yellow for the Soviet player and white and blue for the NATO forces. Now that we have the rules, cards and tokens, the only thing we needed to play the game are some tanks. The starter set features 3 multi-part plastic tanks, 2 Soviet T-64s and a US M1 Abrams to get you up and running with the rules. As I've already mentioned, the tanks are the same as those found in Flames of War Team Yankee, which means they are in 1 to 100 scale, also known as 15mm. The smaller size is perfect for tank-based games as the miniatures themselves are small enough for ease of storage and are generally lower in price, yet they are still big enough to have plenty of detail for painting. As you can see, the Soviet tanks in this set are rendered in an olive drab plastic, whereas the US tanks are in a lighter green. This makes it easy to identify which nation each tank belongs to without needing to add any paint. Assembling the tanks is pretty straightforward as their small size means that only a few components are required. However, unlike Games Workshop kits, the components themselves are not numbered on the sprue, which can cause a little confusion over some parts. Still, most components are distinct enough and the assembly diagrams provided in the kit are quite clear, helping the assembly to be quite easy. The tanks also feature some degree of customization. While the T-64 is limited to having an additional pintle-mounted machine gun or an open or closed commander hatch, the M1 Abrams can be built of one of three variants: the M1, the M1 IP, or the M1 A1, all of which have tank cards featured in this set. Overall, the miniatures are very nicely rendered and will take paint well. I did find some details such as the machine guns were a bit fiddly and unless care was taken could result in some snapped components. However, apart from these areas, the miniatures themselves are solid kits that are full of detail. So now that we've finished assembling these miniatures, let's get a summary for this starter set. Overall, it's a great self-contained box set that features everything you need to get started playing the game in no time at all. The price is also excellent, with an RRP of £20 for rules, tokens, dice, cards and 3 tanks. You really can't complain. This relatively low entry cost can be built upon easily and fairly cheaply with the current and planned expansion sets. This price structure lends itself to the casual nature of the game and should appeal to anyone who's a fan of games like Star Wars X-Wing. If you would like to pick this set up for yourself, it's available on the Firestorm Games web store for £18 and I'll include a link to it in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, do let us know in the comments below and be sure to subscribe to be kept up to date with all of our latest videos. So we just want to say a big thank you for watching this video and we hope to see you again on Firestorm Games.